Hey, welcome to another episode of the Influential Nonprofit. I am here with a guest today. This is Javan Van Gronigen. I'm working on getting your name perfect, and you have a fascinating
Nailed it.
background, and we are going to talk about integrated marketing and how it can really help your nonprofit thrive in any circumstance. I'm going to call it that, right? And I am excited to talk to you because my background is marketing, and I think this is a really good time for nonprofits to understand how they can communicate in the most effective way possible. Hi, and welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It'll be fun.
Okay, so let's get into this now. You may not know this, but I always start with the first question, which is, tell me something you're really proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Hmm. That I don't get to brag about a lot. I mean, I think in the business world, my family, I guess, it's exciting to raise boys. I got two boys, 10 and 12. Don't get to talk about them too much. They're great. My wife is great. I got a farm full of animals here, cat, dog, chickens. Um, so yeah, made my personal life. It's a lot of fun to live here. We're in San Diego, and I got a good crew doing good things.
That's wonderful. Hey, your boys are interesting.
They are. They got a lot of energy. I'm doing a lot of sports these days, which is
Yes.
funny. I wasn't the huge sports person. Of course, I got two kids that want to play
And then want to
sports
do
all
sports.
day,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's how it
it's
happens.
fun. It's fun.
We were talking about that. My husband was telling me about like his friends who are scientists and their kids are both artists. And we're like, well, don't worry, those kids, their kids will rebel into scientists, right? Like everything skips a generation.
I think that's exactly it. You try to teach them what you're into, and they're
And
like,
they're
"No,
they're gonna, yeah. And
I'm gonna
then
do something different."
my oldest was super sporty and then came out trans in 2018. It was like an all boys high school playing defensive end. And for some reason that didn't really stick very well. Couldn't understand why he wasn't really happy there. And then he was like, actually, I'm a she. And that all but it was like so I spent many years with two boys in sports, but when I tell people now about my family, I said I had two girls and a boy. But I'll say something like, oh, my oldest played high school football, and then I have to, because I don't want them, like that's not the part of the story, is like that they came
Yeah.
out. It's like the part of the story was like something about whatever sport we were playing at the time. So all
No.
right. I'm glad you shared that, and I love your house. Sounds really interesting, full of animals. So those are the best.
Just gotta keep them separated. I don't know if they could all be in the same room at the same time.
Okay, so let's talk about, well, first of all, your company, you are the founder of Donately, and it's nonprofit technology. Why don't you just give us a quick little rundown of what your company does?
Yeah, so Donately is a fundraising software. It's campaign pages, embeddable donation forms. Really, we focus on making sure that your website is ready to convert. So it's nice,
Ooh,
simple, easy to use forms, mobilely responsive. Everything's ready to go. Low barrier for any donor. Um, and then campaign pages. When you don't want to use your website or can't use your website, just easy campaign pages that we can spin up. We'll get to this in terms of kind of an operating or fundraising system that we believe in. You should be campaigning on a quarterly basis or in some rhythm, whether that's lapsed donors, new donors. Always good to be testing and trying new things. So we've got a marketplace of campaign pages and functionality you can use. A lot of tools out there in terms of how we differentiate. One is on pricing. We try to ensure that we have a pricing model that fits everybody. And I know that there's a lot of what they call free tools out there and tipping tools, and I think that the industry's gotten kind of crazy when it comes to pricing for fundraising software. So we've come below those marks in terms of what our competitors are doing and really built a flexible pricing system. So that's one thing to where Donately is really unique. Second is in its customization, the way it can integrate with different tools. We don't just send people over to do their integrations on third-party tools. We've built connectors to HubSpot and Salesforce and Constant Contact and MailChimp and hundreds of different technology. So, our idea there is you love the ones you're with, right? You love the tools that you're using and you just bring Donately into the mix. And then the last is customer support. I think we've gotten to a place where we've all, signed up for softwares and tools and there's just no people to help
yeah.
us. And I think in our industry, that's not typically who we're dealing with. It's small two-person teams, three-person
Yeah.
teams, sometimes one-person team, and they don't have a technology background. And so the customer support for us is really big, that we have people that can help get the forms embedded, help you run your campaign. Somebody to talk to, I think, in our space is really critical. So that's the software. And then we talked a touch before we hit record, but there's also a service arm of what we do too called 50 and 50, which is a nonprofit digital brand marketing agency. Because again, that's the blend that we're seeing in the market that's really needed, is the technology, uh, uh, the tech enabled service side of things, right? The technology and the services combined. And I think we'll get a little bit more into that. So I'll pause
Okay.
there.
Oh, all right. But your path to your company is a really interesting one because you were the creative director at Invisible Children and you oversaw the digital strategy for the famous 2012 Coney campaign. And I'm reading from what you gave me. Oh, it engaged over 100 million viewers worldwide. And what I'm reading is from that experience, you realize sort of the good, the bad, the ugly of digital fundraising. And you're like, now I know how to do it. Like now I want to help people do it the best way possible.
Yeah, that was part of the journey, right? We got started in 2009. That was still something that we were still working with Invisible Children through all that the Coney 2012 campaign. Which, for those of you not familiar, it was just a really viral short documentary, which was interesting because at the time the only things going viral were 2 to 3 minute music videos and short little hilarious clips. But this was I want to say it was about a 30-minute documentary about a warlord in Uganda that went viral. So it was really powerful. We had a big network of schools and colleges and churches and groups around the United States that were pushing that out and helping support that story getting out there. And it was definitely a time to recognize how that can go really, really well and get a lot of attention, but also how it can get some bad attention. It definitely had some blowback and some pushback when it became that famous. You couldn't put any content back in the bag, so everything is exposed in those scenarios. Um, but Invisible Children was definitely the nonprofit that made me fall in love with the idea that I could be a marketer and a designer and a digital creative, but do that work in a space that really needs it, right? I was at an agency at the time. They were doing phenomenal work, but it was not nonprofit work. It was, Fortune 500 and, ABC and NBC and Sony and all, great brands, but my heart wasn't there. And I really needed to believe in the work I was doing. And when a nonprofit came along doing something amazing and saving kids from becoming child soldiers, that was a dream come true, to kind of put those two passions of mine, like the digital world, which is always changing and always evolving, which is another thing we'll talk about. But to put that in connection with doing good in the world was where I kind of fell in love with it. Yeah.
That is sort of my story too. I'm so happy to hear you say that
Mm,
because, like, I wasn't, well, way back, I've been around a while, but in the 80s when I went to college, I was an advertising major and I was like, I didn't really, I was having a hard time fitting into that world. And my friends all were, and I just realized I had to care about the work to really want to do the work. And that's when I found nonprofit, like you, a merger of my creative side and then my passion. Like I wanted I that I it was important for me to care about the work to really show up, and that is kind of where I found it. And this was, many
yeah.
years ago before we had as much of the sophistication of the nonprofit that we do now. So it was sort of a mystery to most people what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that was what I called the spray and pray era, because that's really all we had. You would just send out a newsletter and pray that people responded. And now, 30 years later, 40 years later, it's so different. And what you were talking about, and that's what I want to get the meat of what we want to get into is like really the opportunity for integrated marketing and the way that you can use the technology that we have to tell stories, to, like you said, test things out, try new things, and understand what's making you successful in a way like this. Like when I was starting out, we didn't have anything like this. So I just really love your story of how you came into this. So let's talk about I want to start the conversation around integrated marketing with this. What do you feel like is the biggest challenge facing the nonprofits of really who we were talking about, the one, two, three person shops that are already overwhelmed?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we did a peer study, just kind of shot out a survey to nonprofit leaders. We partnered with a couple other marketing agencies and softwares. And so their answers that, I can kind of answer from what we saw in that study is they're tasked with smaller budgets, smaller teams, trying to do more with less. Technology overhauls is a big one, being able to take the technology you have, not break the bank, but to actually get to a place where you can make data informed decisions, right? You can get the dashboards that you need. And what always surprises me because it's so subjective is this idea of storytelling. How many people say like we need to tell our story better, and that becomes the impetus for all of it, right? And so, like we talked about earlier, the idea of looking at all of that, like when I say integrated, what I'm thinking is that you have to be able to look at everything from the very beginning, which is your brand and your brand story, all the way through to that end point, which is how does a team of two or three people put that message out there in a way that continues to garner engagement and convert donors, right?
Right. Like, because there's a consistency, like just commenting on the last part of what you said, because what I see is the consistency falls away. It's like, oh, it's gala season, right? And now they're super absorbed
Hmm.
in this big, like, I don't get me started on galas, but anyway, it's gala season, and so it's delivering things consistently, which can sometimes be an issue. But I want to
Sure.
start at the beginning. What you said is the brand and the story, because and if we could just sort of like walk through, I hear a lot of people say we need to tell our story better. And my question after that is like, for what reason? Because I think sometimes
Yeah.
people think there's a magic set of words that if I find the magic set of words, then somebody will care about my organization. And just so you know, from my perspective, what I coach and train people on is that my job as a marketer, a communicator, is not to get somebody to care. It's to find like-minded people who share the same heart as me, um, who and who would like who feel an affinity for what I'm sharing, not necessarily to try to get somebody to feel differently about something. And so from my perspective, if I'm asking somebody, hey, do you want to tell your story better? I'm looking at it like, for what purpose is that story being
Hmm.
told? So
Sure.
what is it from your perspective? What makes a good nonprofit story?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think the main thing I see is there's just a handful of pieces to a story that if they're misaligned, you can't make a throughput to what you're asking people to do, right? So
Gotcha.
to me, it's not, I think a lot of people go to like, oh, we need a good vision statement, a good mission statement, but that's not how people are engaging with you. I think you have to be able to articulate and I'll leave audience out of it. It is important you speak to the right audience, and that's kind of what you were saying is finding like-minded people really critical. So that's a question I have really early on with organizations is like who does give to you? Who does your organization resonate with? And let's target them. And then what do we tell those people? Um, there's a couple areas that I think a lot of organizations fail. One is to articulate the problem really clearly. A lot of people jump straight into like, hey, we do these things. They put themselves at the center of that. They're the hero. Hey, we jump in and save everybody. And it's nice to have organizations step aside and be more of a guide. But that foundational problem being really clear, hey, this is a big problem. It's not going away. It's pertinent. It's now. You have to convince people it's more important than other issues that are in their life. And for somebody like me, I've got kids. I got a church. Like there's so many things that are like, no, I'm going to ask you to put all those priorities away and say that this is the biggest priority. It requires making that a big deal, being really clear what you do to solve that, and we like kind of how people can then step into that story. I kind of like to call it like a choose your own adventure. If our story was over, we wouldn't have nonprofits, right? The story would be solved. So we're now inviting people into working with us as the guide to solve that problem. So that's kind of the structure of it. The thing I think becomes clearest when we work with nonprofits is the messaging. The key messaging to me becomes the best part because you have to figure out what makes you unique and then how do you talk about yourself and how do you do it to certain audiences? How do you do it on certain channels? So I really enjoy the most leaning into the key messaging is the way that organizations need to focus what it is they're saying. There's no magic words, but there are, hey, if we keep coming back and beating this drum with these 5 bullet points, and kind of tweaking them in different ways, but becoming a bit repetitive with this is who we are, how we're unique, and how we solve this problem. That's how I see it going really well. But that again, that's just the story, right? Then do you have a website and do you have social channels that can tell that and can tell that story well? And do you have video content, right? Then it starts to break into is the story on the big screen and on your
Right.
website
And
and
so
this.
that's kind of the second piece. So the first piece is the brand and
Mhm.
the message. The second piece is kind of the distribution of it. And I don't, what I see in my observation is just not enough use of video. That
Sure.
is sort of the number one way we absorb information right now. I wish I would love for, and I think it is changing, but what do you see? Like
Yeah.
what does that distribution look like?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the different channels, I mean, first you look at YouTube, and I've heard it said YouTube is the second biggest search engine. So people are obviously looking for answers and they want to watch a quick video to figure that out, right? Then you look at their social channels, you look at feeds, you look at the evolution of reels and 10 to 15-second clips as our primary desire in most of those platforms. And you have to say, hey, look, all the evidence is telling us that content consumption in video format is the desired format, right? And it's tricky. I understand where organizations are at, where it's hard to make that content. The barrier of entry to a lot of those, editing tools and platforms have gotten lower and lower, so that's great. And I would say the expectation of the audience to have it be a polished documentary, I mean, that's a big change from when I started till
That
now.
is a very big change.
I mean, we are at our houses producing quality content. We're not, there's no lighting rigs, there's no, big equipment, there's no big editors that are going to come in and polish this up. People have gotten used to short format and low budget, talking head videos. And so the barrier to making video is really, really low now. You just have to have the guts to do it. And I'm taking that advice myself, right? Like this has not been easy for me to jump in front of cameras and do a lot of, podcasting and webinars and things like that. But that's the content that's being desired and we have to create it if we want to
Right.
stay relevant. So
That
definitely see
is,
the same trend.
yeah, I see the same, like the idea of like not having something polished, which I think it was definitely different. And I do think there's a place for the produced video, polished video, right? Like I think it's a yes and also there is
Sure.
a lot of people like just turning the camera on and sharing a quick story about something that's going on. I think can be very impactful. And you're right, it's the courage to do that. It's letting go of
Yeah.
this is what I work with people on, letting go of the result, being vulnerable, being transparent, like just letting people
Yeah.
see, the real story. Because for me, what was happening in the past was we didn't want to, we had to be like shiny and perfect and glossy and lest we be criticized. And I think what we're learning is that people value authenticity and they value, vulnerability and transparency, and having the courage to show that really attracts people to you. And
Yeah.
and I think it's one of the ways, I mean, there's lots of ways to tell the story, but I think telling, like trusting the audience and telling the truth is a bold move from what we did before. And even when in your description of your campaign and the Coney in 2012, like when you get something that big, it people are going to like it or not like it. And that is sort of the part of doing business is people are, if somebody's not mad at what you're doing, you're probably not doing it right. You know what I'm saying? Like praise
Yeah.
and criticism is part of everything. And and so I think you got to see that on sort of a macro level of what that looked
Yeah.
like. But I think nonprofits struggle with that on a smaller level of feeling the sting of criticism and wanting to avoid
Yeah.
it, and therefore playing it a little bit safe with the storytelling and with the marketing.
Yeah. And I might regret saying this, but I just don't think there's room for that. There really isn't. There's so many organizations out there. It's like nobody's playing it safe around us, and that's either in the nonprofit world or outside
I
the
love that
nonprofit world,
then.
that like we can't really play it safe. And it is an industry of what I see that how I see that playing out is I see a lot of risk aversion too. So hey, that's the technology everybody's using. I just want to use that. Yeah, but there's so many of these other things. Hey, here's what AI can start to do for you. Here's what this other new tool. It's like no, no, no. Like the other 10 people I know are using that tool. I want to go with that tool. They're saying it that way. I want to say it that way. And it really creates just this little bubble of people that aren't really competing. They're just kind of scooting around and sounding the same and doing a lot of the same,
Mhm.
things. And I don't like that, right? I really want to see nonprofits act like for-profit businesses, take those risks. You will be rewarded for that if you're more bold and you go after being unique in that space. I think that's an important message I feel like we should get across to people. Um, that's one thing I loved about that organization is being willing to take those risks, being able to go big in what we said we would do, what we would try to accomplish, the overnight work sessions that we had to like launch books or to get videos out the door because the tour started the next day. Like it was a group of people that were diehard about making a difference and making change. And I haven't really seen that as much. There are still great organizations. I shouldn't say it's not out there, but most of the time I think you see a more passive approach of like, hey, we're gonna we're gonna play the game and stay inside the boundaries of how things should be done. And I'd like to push organizations to do that a little different.
This is why my company is called Courageous Communication. This is
Mm,
why we do what we do, because we're out to shake up the world and make change, and I always like, if you're not a little bit scared, then maybe let's like fear is a good thing and it should be
yeah,
along with you because if you're afraid, that means you're stepping into discomfort and that is, that's okay. All right, let's
yep.
talk. I want to talk a little bit more about, digital strategy and what you sort of see as like a way forward, or, what do you see as the best practice or the best way forward for nonprofits who are probably really struggling to integrate all of this together?
Yeah. Two directions to go in. One is in this idea of like a way in which you do things, right? The way in which you do the rhythms. So we talked a little bit about technology, and we talked a little bit about then, hey, like does the story you create have a website that can convert people? The last step of that, when we think of integrated on our side, is then the marketing rhythms, right? What are you doing on a regular basis, quarterly, monthly, weekly, to then get that message out there? I think that's a big piece of whether you're going to succeed or not, is can you continue to do those elements consistently? And something that we try to implement with a lot of our clients too is like an 80/20 rule, right? That we know what's working, 80% of what's working, and we want to operationalize that and keep doing that. So that might be Google ad grants, that might be social media, that might be your email newsletter or email appeals or galas. But then there's always that piece of like, but what's next? What's the next technology? What's the next thing that might come in and be valuable, right? Over the years, we've seen TikTok come in and be really valuable for a lot of content creators. We've seen influencer marketing. We've seen a lot of trends towards direct messaging and LinkedIn, video content, right? But we need to kind of move in and out of those things pretty quickly and be able to adapt, right? I think that's a big part of what you're going to need to be able to do moving forward. So I think that's one area. And I, I hate just lumping it all in as AI, right? But we cannot sit alongside that revolution or that's taking place in the evolution of how technology operates. Like we have to dip our feet in and continue to move forward in what areas of that are going to help our organizations, whether it's understand data better, whether that's customized donor experiences, reaching new donors. There's so much happening there, and maybe we'll kind of dive into it with a few more questions. But I think those two areas in my head have to be a part of what you're thinking about. If you're thinking long term, right? It's how do we do the rhythms in a way that we can try new stuff, right? How do we iterate and build a good rhythm? And then how do we look at AI and how that's going to be changing so much of what we do in terms of reaching people, in terms of analyzing data, productivity. Um, yeah, I think that's
So let's I would love to talk a little bit about AI. I feel like it's a big scary, elephant that people are a little nervous around. So what are
yeah.
you seeing? What are the trends that you're seeing? What is this, how do you see like successful use of this in the nonprofit space?
Yeah. I think like general, like inclusive AI, if you look at it holistically, it can be a little daunting. But if you break it down into like what they call tool AI or just specific areas, I think it's a little bit easier to digest, right? So if you think about just some of the chat prompts or um, some of the tools that are just going to use AI to get you information, I think it becomes a little more digestible. So where I see it as valuable, definitely in the area of analyzing data, there's a lot that you can get out of tools if you just need, whether you have a fundraising platform that can do this or you just have access to donor databases or some of the new tools that are coming out, but just understanding better who are my donors, what are they doing, what are their behaviors. You just have the ability to audit and look through mounds of information far better than you used to. So understanding who your audience is, what's working, what's not, that's really critical and I think really valuable. And I love using a lot of the AI tools just as a part of the strategic ecosystem, right? So throwing
Yep.
ideas around, doing lookups on organizations, on competitors, on hey, what is the internet see of us, right? Doing a lookup on like how do we present ourselves, and hey, we want to make this move, or this is important to us now. How can we better communicate? Like it's not at the point where it should be writing on your behalf, but you can use it to strategize. Another thing I like to do is just say, hey, this is stuff I want to talk about. What are things that people need to know about? Even a podcast like this, right? Like, hey, these are the things that we want to talk about. Like, tell me what's going on the internet and what people are asking about and what content is interesting so we can cover it and provide answers to that. So I think in almost every job and in almost every field, there are ways that you can lean on it, either like behind closed doors and just use it as a resource for yourself, or utilizing some of the new tools that it's almost just a new framework for getting at data and producing content and producing ideas that just the speed to which it can operate has never been there before. So I would argue just get going, right? Google LM is a great tool, Gemini is a great tool, Claude is a great tool, ChatGPT is a great tool. Just
Yeah.
trying
And
it. I know it was crazy for me until I tried it, and I was
I
like,
know it was
oh,
crazy
once
for
I
me
tried it, it
too.
was like,
Me too. And I mean,
yeah,
I'm like, Chat GPT, where should my best friend and I go for our best friends weekend? And I got all the resorts, like, and I talked about the
yep,
who we were and what we were looking for, and they gave us a list of resorts. And anyway, like you can really ask it anything, but and you
yeah.
mentioned Claude and Chat GPT. I use those, and they're different. They have different like kind of expertise, or um
Hmm.
and but I do feel like if you're somebody like me who is um it's like is a works independently or in a very small team, it is nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, you know,
Yeah.
and and you know, and I think that is great. And that is also a great place to start. Like you said, if you once you just start using it, you can then figure out all the ways that you want to use it. And I love what you're saying about like really analyzing data, because one of the things that you said, I like, the idea of making data informed decisions, which is there's so much out there, it can almost be hard to access it or connect to it, or understand it. So a tool like that could be really helpful, whereas before it would take you maybe hours to root through a bunch of data. It can look at it and give you some guidance in a very short amount of time, and that's incredible. All right, and
Yeah.
I want to go back to the other thing you said about the rhythms, because I love the idea. I talk a lot about flow and rhythm. And one of the things I think is really interesting that you present is the idea of like a rhythm, but in a way that we're kind of looking to what's next. And I feel like sometimes what's next feels so overwhelming because I can't even keep up with what's now, you
Yeah.
know? And so I'd love to talk how you help nonprofits do that, where you can try something out or just something new doesn't feel so overwhelming. It feels like an opportunity. And I think that's a big shift. And I love that because like you said, it can be a risk averse community, not all the time, but it can be, especially if you have a board, over you saying,
Yeah.
results. So what I just want to hear your take about like how can you integrate the idea of a rhythm and then in a rhythm in a way that like, and then you can try new things or experiment. And
Yeah.
that's such a proactive place to be. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, with the services that we provide, it's always best when we can put everything into one space, right? So if you're on Donately and you're utilizing the services, we just have access to so much to then kind of power this off of. But our idea is that we want to build what we call a roadmap, which is all the things we know we need to be doing over time. And then it's how quickly can we get through it is really like at the pace to which organizations can afford what their budget is, right? But what that does, it flies in the face of what a lot of marketing agencies do, which is kind of get into this always on, hey, we're going to manage your SEO. Then we're going to layer on paid. Then we're going to layer on social, and all of a sudden you're spending five, six, $7,000 a month. But that's just
Wow.
kind of set. It's just set, and over time you go, okay, that's money we're putting in, but are we getting anything in return? And I think that's kind of a really passive way to be alongside an organization just pumping out content. You have to be back in there and recognizing what's working and what's not. So what we do is we audit early on, we find out what we see as the biggest opportunities, and then we put that into what we try to do is break it down into quarterly kind of intensives, right? What are we going to focus on this quarter? Then what are we going to focus on next quarter and next quarter? And right, you might have a big gala and that might take up your entire budget for the quarter. That's fine. We'll pull back in a couple other areas. Maybe we'll go a little bit lighter on the social side of things, or maybe we'll kind of just let our paid media run for a little while. But we want to keep going back to those projects, and I think it's better for our service team anyway that they're just projects, start date, end date. We can look at like a 3 month chunk of time and go, what's the best thing we can do for our time? And then let's do that again and again and again versus just set and forget deliverables. We're not good at that. We're not good at coming back and revisiting that and saying, hey, this is that rhythm over and over and over and over again. How do you keep making that valuable? It's like, no, we've done that. Now let's move over here. And there is, you mentioned that balance of like what's currently working and how do you just keep adding to that pot. And I think that's where we're saying, you take the thing that you're currently doing, and if you don't have any more time to do it and it's not creating results, then like eliminate it, right?
Let's
Like we
not do
don't,
it.
as an
Yeah.
agency, yeah, we've really backed off on social, which is, at times I am embarrassed, right? Like I look at my social and I'm like, we didn't post anything for like 2 weeks and that wasn't that great of a post and the engagement's low. But honestly, when we were on every channel out there pumping out stuff every couple of days, when we really looked at the data, it was like, look, none of our clients are coming here. We're not pumping out the content that like potential employees or like people who are interested in brand and culture, like we're not making that type of content. What we need is to step over here and do the following things, right? Like LinkedIn is working, so let's lean in there. Let's lean into the content creation. There's tons of people reading our content, and that's working really well. If you're not doing that, we just kind of consider that random acts of marketing. You're just putting a ton of time into things
I
that aren't
Oh
working,
my
right?
God,
So
can
like
I
you got to
use
change that.
that random acts of marketing? That is so because here's what
Yeah,
I see is like you're stirring up a lot of, or you could or could not, but you're posting and it's just like the act of doing it, the output, and like okay, but how am I moving people from social media? Like I look at it as a
yeah,
process onto my email list, right? The social media, like that's rented land, right? Like I'm building my house on rented land. Like I want people
yeah,
in my orbit, in my database, like reliable reach. Like I want to have, because I see social media, that's unreliable reach. Unless you pay for it, that's unreliable
yeah.
reach. So you just don't know. Their algorithm can change. There's just a big thing coming down, like, oh,
It's
they're gonna
always
change
changing.
all the TikTok algorithm. Um,
Yeah,
and so we want people like, and then from the email list, then how do we get them into an event? Like everything is designed to move people deeper into, not everybody's gonna come, that's fine. But if you're not doing it for the purpose, like what is the purpose of this? And if it's not to move people along, then why are we doing it? Right? If it's to
yeah,
post for post's sake, because you can say, oh, this got this many, but what is that? So I'm with you on this. Like, what is that really doing?
yeah,
And is that really where we should be spending our energy? And you look at like the random acts of marketing or like data, like looking at the data of like, hey, this isn't really worth our time. So maybe let's it's okay, status quo, and then we can like, spend our energy investing in something else that is working. And also I think it does make you more open to like, okay, what could we try, or what is working, or what could work better than what we've been
yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably the simplest thing somebody could do if they don't already have this, and I'm sure other tools do this too. You install Donately, you put the form in there, you put your Google Analytics tracking in the back end, and immediately you have the e-commerce tracking insights to understand, okay, where did those people come from? Oh, hey, look, half of them came from email, or 10% of them came from organic search. And then you, okay, well, like what were they searching? And you start to backpedal through all that data to recognize these are our donors. And I think the biggest mistake organizations make is they take some of those top funnel metrics. Oh my gosh, we got 2,000 people a day to our site for, 100,000 people to, who were they? Right? Did they just see a random article that has nothing to do with you and they're not going to turn into donors? Like you have to get all the way to the bottom and work your way backwards. So it's not a crazy data play there to just say, hey, get e-commerce tracking all the way down to the dollar, right? You have to know that not just that they converted, because was that a $5 donation or a $5,000 donation? Get the e-commerce tracking working and then look back. Are they on mobile devices? Are they in cities or in urban areas? Like there's so much you can do once you know them. And you got to do that homework, right? And then if you want to get more into the weeds, you can start to look at, you can run campaigns, you can run paid media to really start to focus in on exactly where they're coming from. But that's, I would say 75% of organizations that we work with still, they'll have Google Analytics, but it's like, okay, great. Like what do we have to, maintain, or, how are you tracking it? It's like, oh, I don't know. Like that's, some guy over there. I don't even know how to access it. So having somebody at least give you that, right? Just to even look at like, hey, here's a breakdown of where your donors are coming from, helps you then go, okay, now here's our budget. Are we going to do more events, or are we going to do more blog content? If you don't know where your donors are coming from, you don't know where to put your money. So
Yeah. And like understanding that can really help you just focus your energy. Like I always say, we release what no longer serves us to make room for what does. And that's the data of, right? Like
yeah,
that's how you figure out what's working and what's not. And I do feel like, maybe more people than we would like to think about are kind of flying blind. They're just doing it to do it, not
yeah.
understanding like, yeah, we got like I just had a conversation with somebody and they have this event and 15,000 people come to this event. It's a huge event. I'm like, who
Oh
are
wow.
they? They don't know.
Hmm.
They don't know. Um, and like, okay, that's a lot of energy that we kind of stir up, but then it just sort of drifts off into the world. And what I'm talking
Yeah,
about is like taking that energy and like pulling it down into your organization. And what I
yeah,
love is like your perspective of sort of like getting down to the finite so you can really understand who the folks are that love you. And then, and then create messages and things that are of value to them, right? and
yeah,
and and understand the patterns so that you can, once I understand the pattern or the data, then I can intentionally create that over and over
yeah.
again, correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think AI is getting a little dangerous because it's so easy to explore anything. Hey, I want to do this. Great. I can, it can have the idea and it can have the brief and it can have a page of content for you. And like it's, but if you have not put the bumpers on that tool to say, no, this is specifically what I need. And to your point, right? If they have a big 15,000 person event going on and they don't have data, that's where you start.
Right.
How do I get to know people? I'm going to have them and you'll get great ideas. Like, hey, why don't you run a raffle, but in order to do the raffle, you have to get people's information, or maybe at registration tables, you're getting more information on those people so that you can remarket to them, come back to like you need direction. And I think that data starts there. Then you start to recognize, okay, here are the metrics I need to be focusing on. Then you can start leaning in on some of these productivity tools. That's the thing I think, even for myself, it's so easy to just jump into those tools and be like, okay, and like, oh, I waste 2 hours going super deep on something. And then the next day I'm like, no, that's not really what that's not what we need to be doing. And there is, a whole expose on something that's just going to sit on the shelf. So, I think everybody's battling that a little bit. It's almost like the invention of fire. We're like, we know it's amazing. We're just not quite sure what we need to do with it.
Yes,
And
I
and we're
always,
learning as we fly.
because I am a lady of a certain age, I remember when, the desktop computer came in
Hmm.
and we all had access to 50 fonts and everybody was using 50 fonts. It just reminds like, and then
Yeah.
we realized, you know what? We'll figure it out, right?
Pick
You get
two.
excited, and then you kind of figure out where you want to go from there. Okay,
Yeah.
so what is if people are interested to learn more about Donately or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Most of the stuff I'm doing, I'm putting on LinkedIn. So just look me up on LinkedIn. For Donately, it's just donately.com. And then if you're interested in signing up or giving it a try, it's very low commitment. There's no, yearly fees or anything. You can go to donately.com/podcast. And we've got a special for the different podcasts that I've been on the last few months. It's a year free. So I would just check
Oh,
it
that's
out.
very
It's
cool.
Yeah, yeah, and there's all sorts of different ways you can pay for it. You can go all the way to just kind of having a percentage taken out, or you can go the other way and just pay down and have no fees. I mentioned that earlier. I think the pricing model is awesome. So very low commitment there. I think it's a great tool to get some of that data that we were talking about. So check that one out. 50and50.org, all written out if you're looking for agency services. And I'll apologize. I'm sorry, those are two different things. I'm working on rebranding and putting those back together with our teams. But yeah, service side, product side, and then yeah, just for following what I'm doing, LinkedIn is a great
Cool.
spot.
And we'll put all that in the show notes so if you're like driving, you don't have to pull over. That's all there for you.
Yeah, be safe.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And okay. So my last question is always the same as well. I'm in St. Louis, you're in San Diego area. But if we ever found ourselves in a karaoke bar one night, what's your go-to song?
Ooh. I don't do karaoke, but I have thought about what I would do, and it's probably waited from my kids. Maybe I'd try the bar song by Shabuzi. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah. That's
Let's
a
go for that
universal
one.
banger. That's what I call it.
I feel like I'd get some fans with that one.
You would too. The bar song is like so like my kids are adopted. My kids are black. Here's my 21-year-old black son like turning it up and I'm almost 60. We're like, woo, I said this is what I call a universal banger. Like Earth, Wind and Fire
Yeah,
September. That everyone's
there you
like,
go.
"Oh, yeah, I got that one." That's a good one. You're gonna get people going. And I haven't heard a lot of people do that one yet. So I spend a lot of time at karaoke. So
That's awesome.
it's
It
my
is
creative.
fun. I just don't have the guts to do it. That's not my outlet.
Yeah,
I'll make the
right.
posters to get everybody there.
There you go.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for being here. Again, if you are
Likewise.
interested in connecting more, the everything's going to be in the show notes. And I hope this inspires you to think about, digital marketing, thinking about integrated marketing and how you can make everything work together for your benefit and make data informed decisions and stop the random acts of marketing. I'm going to use that again. That's
It's out
perfect.
there. I have not
Thank you so
copywritten,
much.
so it's out there.
All right, well, that's it for this episode of the Influential Nonprofit. As always, if you want to get in touch with me, my link is in the show notes. I'm happy to connect with you about building your influence, connecting better, and authentic, aligned relationship building. That's where I'm at. And we'll see you next time on the Influential Nonprofit.